US President Donald Trump spoke in praise of India at the UN General Assembly, lauding the country for its efforts to lift millions of its citizens out of poverty. Trump said and echoed, "There is India, a free society of over 1 billion people, lifting millions of people out of poverty into the middle class," unquote. Donald Trump departed the United Nations. He told reporters that his Tuesday morning speech was meant to get some laughter. Trump had gone off script at the UN General Assembly debate after the audience erupted in laughter to his claim that in less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. President Trump had responded good-naturedly. Trump said he didn't expect that reaction but was fine with it. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said that his country could not remain silent over the use of sanctions as weapons while it is in a bitter standoff with the United States over the fate of an American pastor detained by Ankara. Ties between Washington and Ankara had hit a low in August when President Donald Trump announced steep new tariffs on Turkish steel and aluminium in response to the detention of an American pastor in Turkey. The Turkish lira has taken a beating on the currency market, sparking fears in Turkey of a full-blown economic crisis. Leaders of Canada, France and United Kingdom convened a meeting on the sidelines of the United Nations on the topic of female empowerment and access to education, which they held up as a leading issue. Female empowerment was previously a theme of the Millennium Development Goals, but universal primary education was not achieved by 2015. The next goal being set by the United Nations is for 2030, by which the UN is expecting that every girl and boy to have the opportunity of completing 12 years of quality primary and secondary education. More than 100 demonstrators braved rain and gathered outside the UN to denounce the presence of Iran's President Hassan Rouhani, holding signs and banners reading "No to Rouhani" and "Down with Dictator." Protesters said they were looking to build on momentum that grew out of the uprising in December to more than 100 cities. Shops across Argentina were shuttered and the streets of Buenos Aires, the capital, were quiet as the country's largest union called a 24-hour strike to protest President Mauricio Macri's handling of the economy, which has been racked by runaway inflation. The strikers are demanding the government compensate for inflation expected to top 20% this year, driven by a 50% slide in the value of the peso currency against the dollar. Police detained protesters after firing stun grenades during demonstrations in South Africa's Cape Town. Local media reported that the protest, organized by a group called the Western Cape Total Shutdown, was a demonstration against poverty, unemployment, corruption, violence and crime in the city. In a statement, the group said that the fall of apartheid in 1994, nothing much has changed for our working class communities. Enough is enough. Prime Minister Theresa May signaled that she would prefer a no-deal Brexit to the offer currently put forward by the European Union, stressing that Britain needs to seek counter-proposals from the EU to move Brexit negotiations forward. Speaking to reporters in New York on her way to attend the United Nations General Assembly, May said that she thought a bad deal would be a deal that broke up the United Kingdom. When asked whether a no-deal Brexit was better than one similar to the existing Canada-EU trade deal. Thousands of people gathered in Tallinn to participate in a mass lead by Pope Francis on the last day of his tour of the Baltic states. Winding up the trip, the Pope said nations should not measure their strength by their military capability to prevail over others. The three Baltic states won independence after the end of World War I, only to be annexed by the Soviet Union in 1940, occupied by Nazi Germany during World War II, and reabsorbed by the Soviet Union until its breakup in 1991. Pope Francis defended a landmark deal between the Vatican and China on the appointment of bishops, saying he had not Beijing government would have the final say on who was named In his first public comments on the deal signed in Beijing, Pope Francis told reporters that he realized not everyone would understand the logic behind the deal, but that he was confident in the great faith of Chinese Catholics. Pope Francis finally acknowledged the ongoing sex abuse scandal and said that if a priest abused a child, it was a monstrous act. Pope also said that he had never requested a pardon for a priest that had been found guilty of abuse. Speaking to the media, Pope said that accusations of the Church having covered up sexual abuse cases were not always true. As in previous generations, cases of sexual abuse had been covered up in society and viewed as a matter of shame. The chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee confirmed that the panel has hired an outside counsel to question Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and the woman who accused him of sexual assault. The move comes as Kavanaugh's historic hearing, in which he and one of his accusers, Christine Blasey Ford, will testify, approaches on Thursday, and parties on both sides clash over whether a second woman's recent allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior by the nominee will also be discussed during the hearing.
Tell us why you're here. Senator wouldn't talk to us.
Family members from the southern Mexican state of Guerrero protest in front of the Supreme Court in the capital to demand a fair and final resolution in 2014 still unresolved 43-student kidnapping case. Nearly 4 years after the disappearance of teaching students, and despite the fact that dozens of arrests have been made, the fate of the youngsters captured on September 26 by police in the southern city of Iguala and then supposedly turned over to a group of organized crime is still unknown. Hundreds of people were ordered out of their homes and Pisa airport was shut down on Tuesday following a huge fire which swept wooded hills in Italy's central Tuscany region. The authorities are continuing to fight the flames. Regional officials say that the evacuees would not be able to return to their homes until at least Wednesday. Schools in the region would remain closed until the blaze is under control. After a long wait, the Supreme Court will finally deliver its verdict on the validity of Aadhaar today. The court has reserved its verdict following a marathon 38-day hearing that spanned over for 4 months. A 5-judge constitution bench will hear the argument of all the parties before reserving its verdict. Non-stop rainfall in North India claimed at least 11 lives in Haryana, Jammu and Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh. A red alert was issued in Punjab. Himachal Pradesh has been worst affected, with 8 people having lost their lives in the state alone. Hundreds, including school students, remain stranded across Himachal Pradesh after heavy rain lashed the state for the 3rd day, triggering landslides and snapping over 200 road links. While top leaders made headlines, it's baby that made heads turn at the United Nations. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made an appearance with her 3-month-old baby at the Nelson Mandela Peace Summit at the United Nations headquarters. In what is being called the discovery of a decade, archaeologists find the remains of a ship which sank off the coast of Portugal while returning from India some 400 years ago. The ship was discovered 12 meters below the surface of the sea and is believed to have been sunk between 1575 and 1625. The ship contains spices, Chinese ceramics and cannons engraved with Portugal's coat of arms. Shells used as currency from that period were also found in the wreck. The Mid-Autumn Festival was celebrated across China with traditional entertainment. Civilians participated in the celebrations, watching the full moon, tasting delicious food and mooncakes, enjoying songs and dances. The Mid-Autumn Festival is a harvest festival under traditional Chinese culture. The festival is held on the 15th day of the 8th month of the Chinese lunar calendar, with full moon at night.